Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Brody Lusk enthusiasts, people who are tuning into OU basketball for the first time, maybe in quite some time. This is the video for you. This is In the Paint, a basketball video series fueled by OUinsider.com and the Rivals Network. This is our second episode of this show. My name is Jesse Crittenden, and I am joined by Brody Lusk, our basketball contributor and recruiting guy over at OUinsider.com. Brody, the Sooners, number 7 in the
Yeah,
AP poll, 10-0. How are the vibes right now with Porter Moser's squad?
I'm not sure the vibes can get any better. I mean, you would have asked, told me coming into the season they would be ranked number 7 right now, and that's just crazy. Just the absolute turnaround this program has seen in a year's worth of time. It's just crazy. Number 7 in the country, which they got to number 7 back in 2021, I believe. But it's super high up there, and this week there's an opportunity to boost the hype behind the program and boost that ranking even more.
This is just the 7th time since Buddy Hield was on the team that OU is in the top 10 in the AP poll. Obviously, that came out just a little bit ago. It's crazy, man, to not only think about the fact that this team was not ranked the first 2 seasons under Porter Moser, but they went from 25 to 18 to 11 to 7.
Yeah.
It's just it's a crazy how much this team has climbed. I mean, 18 spots in less than a month. And man, I just think there's a lot of excitement with this team right now. Obviously, we've got a massive game to preview on Wednesday. Oklahoma versus number 11 North Carolina at the Jumpman Invitational on Wednesday. Just a huge game. But before we dive into that, I think it's pertinent to talk about OU's win over Green Bay on Saturday, an 81-47 game that was probably a little more interesting than some would have expected in the first half, but OU kind of took off. 15-0 run in the first half. There was a 22-0 run in the second half. And by midway through the second half, I mean, or really by halftime, it really wasn't a game anymore. But Brody, it's just Green Bay. This came after, some games against Providence, Arkansas, USC, Iowa. So a game OU should have won, but I think there were still some things to take away from it. What was your overall impression and takeaway from that win on Saturday?
Yeah. First of all, I mean, just I think your first half, you kind of saw a week off and finals week, and maybe they had a hard time waking up for that game, or at least being ready for that game. It was super late tip off, later than usual. But I think the biggest takeaway it still lies on Otega Owe. I think it proves to be an elite two-way player, and he had 7 steals, a career high for him. 7 steals and I think 12 points against Green Bay. And you mentioned that 15-0 run to close out the first half, and at one point in the first half with 5 minutes left, it was a 1 point game. And then later on in the second half, Oklahoma was up by 40, and I think Otega Owe was a really big contributor into how those were and how that lead just changed so quickly. He really resembled a DCO, defense creates offense. That's a term Porter Moser uses a ton. That's something this team has kind of really kind of their motto almost in certain aspects. So I think I was incredibly impressed with the way Owe played. He was super aggressive, it was great to see. His defense, everyone's known it could be really good, but he kind of put it all together. And Milos Houston and Javian McCollum, they only combined for 13 points, and the Sooners, they still went out and scored a ton of points. That just showcased the depth of this team, which has really been one of the big takeaways you would have through the first 10 games of the season.
You mentioned Otega, man, 7 steals on the night, and he kind of made it look effortless. First time that's happened in almost 25 years that an OU player has had 7 or more steals in a game. And yeah, I'm glad you touched on it at the very end, man. I think there were 2 things that stood out to me. I think one was not a great scoring performance by Javian McCollum, just 9 points, 3 of 8 shooting. You throw Los in there, 4 points, 2 of 7 shooting. But you still, I mean, you got a season high 8 assists from Javian. I think that stood out. You got 4 assists from Los. So even though they weren't scoring a ton, they were still contributing offensively. And OU kind of just got performances from everybody. I mean, 13 from Rivaldo Soares, 11 from John Hughley, 12 from Ortega. I think that stood out to me. And I think the other thing, man, is, and I'm curious, I'm going to ask Porter about this tomorrow. We're supposed to have a Zoom to preview the game on Wednesday. One thing I'm going to be kind of interested to ask him is I'm curious if what his take is about if this team can flip the switch. That's something you hear a lot, especially in basketball, especially with really, really good teams. And I think Porter is probably one to tell you that he's going to want his team to play consistently all the time, right? But I think we've already seen with this OU team, I mean, yeah, it was 21-20 with 5 minutes to go on Saturday and then just a 15-0 run. And then even to start the second half, they weren't very good shooting the ball. I think they started 1 of 6 or 1 of 7 and then a 22-0 run. And we even saw it against Providence, a game that was pretty close in that second half. And then OU just went on a huge run to end that game and made it look not close. I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm curious what Porter has to say, but what do you think about that idea? I mean, have we seen that this team can kind of just flip a switch, so to speak?
It definitely has looked like that. I mean, you can point out a handful of just runs this team has went on where they've kind of put the game out of reach. And, I think that's something that they didn't have last year. They weren't able to really go out there and, put a team away, step on a team's throat. And that's what you've kind of seen this team be able to do. And that's something that they'll need to be able to flip a switch in Big 12 play, because there's not always going to be games where they come out extremely hot, or, there's going to be times they're shooting the ball bad. There's going to be times, Javian isn't scoring a ton of points in the first half, or Los isn't hitting. But to be able to flip a switch and all of a sudden go on a huge run on multiple occasions, I think that is definitely something this team can do, as they've proven. And I definitely think it's something that's really going to benefit them come conference play, and maybe even come Wednesday night. I mean, that might be a situation where you've got to flip the switch and go on a run. So, yeah, you're not always going to start games super well. And that was the case on Friday night or Saturday night against Green Bay. So, yeah, I think it's huge for them to be able to flip a switch. And I definitely think Porter would say they need to be consistent.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he will, but I think I'm going to be curious to see if he believes in that idea that a
Yeah.
team can flip a switch, even if it's not just his. But yeah, man, and I think the other thing I'll shout out real quick is, I mean, OU's defense continues to be really, really good, especially in spurts. There are just stretches of nearly every game this season where they're just playing lockdown defense, and that's actually as tough as the last couple of years have been. There's been moments where the defense has been really good, even in conference play. I think the problem is OU couldn't score enough to really kind of stretch those runs, kind of like you were talking about. But the thing, like, defense has been really impressive. I mean, their opponents are shooting under 38% on the season, and I mean, again, I mean, they forced. They had 21 points. They had 21 fast break points. That was really what fueled, especially that run in the first half. Was getting out in transition. I mean, Green Bay had 20 turnovers. OU had 12 steals. And that's just, again, another example of, I think that's the thing that stands out to me, is not only is the defense good, but they're using that defense to create opportunities in transition. You had the Ortega dunk. You had the Jalen Moore alley oop.
Yeah.
Not only highlight level plays, but those are energy big plays that this team has been able to show through the first 10 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I definitely think, also there was the Rivaldo Soares dunk. I mean, and he's someone who I think really stepped up in that game. He really came off the bench, and it just kind of like he was a spark. And, that's something that Oklahoma's bench has just been able to do. And I think Sam Godwin also played really well against Green Bay. He's been one of the best offensive rebounders in the country, and he had 4 of them against Green Bay.
In
So
15 minutes.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like every time the ball Oklahoma misses, Godwin's going to be there. And, that's what he does. He just makes really solid plays that help the team.
Now, we talk about all that. And look, we prefaced before we talked about this that it was against Green Bay. that, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't have positive takeaways, but Oklahoma's going to face a bit of a different challenge on Wednesday, not only compared to Green Bay, but compared to what they faced all season. OU has had tests already. I don't think they've seen a team quite like they're going to see in this North Carolina team on Wednesday. It's technically a neutral site game, 8 o'clock
Away
Central
game.
Time on Wednesday. It's in Charlotte. Porter
Yeah.
even kind of alluded to that after the game. It's not really a neutral site game, but it's one of those things to me, man, that and look, I've said it, you've said it. I know people, over at OUInsider.com have said it. It's a social media thing that, as exciting as this team is, you've still got conference play. There's still things to look forward to, to maybe be cautious about. This is essentially a conference game right here, man. North Carolina, a top 15 team that's had some really good moments this season. They've had a couple of tough losses, but man, we talked about it before we started recording. I mean, this stretch of games recently, man, just back to back: Villanova, Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida State, UConn, and Kentucky. Just a really tough gauntlet, and now Oklahoma. And they've lost a couple of tough games back to back to UConn and Kentucky. That Kentucky game, I think there were chances they had to win, but lost by 4. Um, Brody, this is a North Carolina team that could put points up on the board. They're 25th in the country in scoring, averaging over or almost 85 points a game. What stands out to you about this matchup, and what, and from an Oklahoma perspective, what are the keys going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a couple of the national analysts talk about Oklahoma, and their argument in Oklahoma, they're being cautiously optimistic would be the word. And their argument has been, well, did they catch USC at the right time? Did they catch Providence at the right time? Did they catch Arkansas at the right time? Listen, North Carolina, there's no catching them at the right time. I mean, they've played, as you mentioned, a ton of super tough games. And, this really is the game where you're going to be able to learn a lot about Oklahoma's team. And one of the, the best, really one of the best aspects of this matchup that I'm interested to see is when North Carolina has the ball. North Carolina's offense is 10th in adjusted efficiency. Oklahoma's defense is 8th in adjusted efficiency. So basically, when North Carolina has the ball, it's going to be very interesting to see which team wins that battle. Is it going to be Oklahoma's defense, or is it going to be North Carolina's offense? And then another thing that's very interesting is, North Carolina has Armando Bacot, who, ask anyone, he's one of the best big men in college basketball. And, he's been at North Carolina for quite some time, but he's really going to be a challenge for Sam Godwin and John Hughley. How are they going to be able to defend him? Are they going to still, both of them, be able to, rebound the basketball at a high level? That's going to be super interesting, as well as the RJ Davis matchup. Is who's going to guard him? Is it going to be Otega Oweh? That's probably your likely matchup. But UNC has some firepower. They've got some guys that can go. They had a really good transfer portal class. They've got one of the best freshman point guards in the country, Elliot Cadeau. And as you mentioned, they were right there to beat Kentucky. They've been playing a ton of tough games. So this is certainly one it's going to be very challenging for Oklahoma. And, Oklahoma, I think this one will be similar to the USC game, as it's going to be super close. And yeah, it's definitely an away game. The fact that they're even calling it a neutral site, it's crazy to me. KenPom listed as a semi-away. And speaking of KenPom, they've got this game. Their predicted final score, 78-77. So that kind of shows how close, KenPom thinks this game will be.
That's a really good stat, man. And yeah, North Carolina's the reality is they've got studs on their roster. 3 or 4 guys that can really go off in any game. I think, to me, man, the thing I'm looking at is, you kind of mentioned it with Hughley and Godwin. I think Oklahoma's going to have to win the rebounding battle. This is a North Carolina team that actually hasn't rebounded the ball super well this season. I mean, I think they're 203rd nationally in total rebounds. Hasn't been a strong suit of them. Or for them. I think the other thing is they've gotta limit their turnovers. If there's one thing that hasn't been great for them this season, it's been their turnovers. They had 16 against Green Bay. They've turned the ball over 12 or more times in all but one game this season. I think this is going to be a game where if you lose those 2 battles, if you allow North Carolina to get out in transition, if OU can't win the rebounding battle, if they don't get offensive boards, I think this is that spells trouble for them. I think, and again, this is a well-rounded team that we've seen for Oklahoma. They've got a really solid 8-man rotation, but to me, this has got a JV McCollum game all over it. I think this has got to be a game where he steps up and kind of leads the offense like he has for most of the season. I mean, right? I mean, outside of Javian, you're going to need something from everybody, but this just seems like a Javian McCollum game. It just does.
This has got to be one of those games where he goes out there and takes over, right? There's been, I think a lot of, national sites, Bleacher Report has said JV McCollum may be the most underrated point guard in the country, or JV McCollum possibly could be a first round draft pick this year. This is the type of game where he goes out there and he shows just how good he can be, or Oklahoma loses the game. I think it's really that simple. JV McCollum, 9 points and 8 assists. That's good, right? He really found a way to affect the game against Green Bay. But that's not going to fly against North Carolina. You're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to go and get 15, 20. And Milo Shuzan is also going to have to step up. So I'm very interested to see, how this game looks. I think you might see a pretty big game from Otega Oweh just based on the way North Carolina likes to push the tempo and the way Oklahoma likes to push the tempo. I think that could favor Oweh. And then the rebounding. Another guy that they're really going to have to rely on is Jalen Moore. Jalen Moore has been very good at going up and getting the rebounds. He's going to have to do that against North Carolina. So, yeah, I think this is definitely a game where you're going to have to put the ball in Javian McCollum's hands and you're going to say, hey, go win us this game. That's kind of what Oklahoma has to do here. I think he's the key. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he performs against RJ Davis is a really good defender. So, yeah, it'll be definitely a matchup to watch.
Good mention about Jalen Moore. He led the team in rebounds on Saturday with 8. And yeah, man, I think both these teams want to push the pace. And to me, I think you can almost book it now. The team that finishes with the most points and most opportunities in transition, that's who's going to win this game. And I think it's going to be interesting that you've seen a lot of teams try to Oklahoma's been able to kind of assert their will in transition most of the season. It's going to be interesting to see if they can do that against North Carolina. But I think from a big picture standpoint, Brody, this is the most excited that Oklahoma basketball fans have been about this team in a long time. And and now Oklahoma's heading into, this isn't Green Bay. This isn't Arkansas Pine Bluff. Is a top 15 North Carolina team essentially on the road. And again, I think reasonably there has been some cautious optimism about, what happens when OU hits conference play. What should fans' expectations or maybe mindset be going into this game? Is it win or bust? Is it, well, even if they don't win, as long as X, Y, and Z happens, what should the fan expectation be going into this game?
Yeah, I don't want to say win or bust, but I definitely don't want to sit here and say, well, you're looking for a moral victory. No, you're a top 10 team. You got to expect to win, even like a game like this. And so I think fans should, expect a close game. And I wouldn't say expect an OU win, but that's kind of where we're at here. You can't really say, expect them to lose. So I would just expect a close game and hope for the best and just hope for Javian McCollum to really take over the game down the stretch. But yeah, this is, obviously it would be a huge win in the fact that, the excitement for this team would go up, the ranking would go up, but, put the ranking aside, this is the win that maybe you do struggle a little bit in conference play. This is a win that you could point at, in March and say, this is really a huge victory, but they're going to have to go out there and win that game first. And, UNC, I think almost would have been better if they would have beat Kentucky for Oklahoma, because maybe they're coming in riding a little bit too high and then Oklahoma gets them. But this is a team that just lost a super close game to North Carolina. They've lost a close game to Villanova, close game to, UConn, who's probably one of the best teams in the country. So this is definitely one. I think North Carolina is going to have a lot of extra motivation to really get a big win for them. And, we're at a point where North Carolina is looking at a game against Oklahoma saying this would be a huge win for us. So I think it's kind of crazy to look at it in that perspective. But yeah, I'd expect a close game.
It's a huge opportunity for this Sooners team, man. Imagine, the enthusiasm, the national relevance, the trajectory, all of that skyrockets with a win. But I think at bare minimum, I think this is a rare opportunity for really good insight into how this Oklahoma team can play in conference play. Now, obviously, North Carolina is not a Big 12 team. The Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball. But to me, it's even not even just a win. It's have the things that Oklahoma has done really well up to this point. Can they continue that? That's been the thing the last 2 years for me is even when there were good moments in non-conference play, once they hit conference play, that kind of went out the window. Does that defense still shine through? Does that athleticism still shine through? Does JV McCollum have some good moments? Does Otega Owe have another big game? Does Sam Godwin continue to get offensive rebounds? I think those are the things you're looking for, even outside of a win or loss. I think if you're a fan who's a little bit worried or a little bit cautious about what the future holds, I think those are the things you're looking for. But ultimately, man, I don't know how you can't get excited about this game. I mean, this is one of the biggest non-conference games for Oklahoma in years.
Oh, yeah.
Years.
I can't think of one on the same scale as this game. Off the top of my head, there's just not one. This is, yeah, this is probably, if you're a fan, this has got to be the most excited you've been. Forget non-conference, but maybe for a game. Like, last year, what games were, is there to be super excited about? Number one, Alabama, yeah, but, Oklahoma wasn't a top 10 team. This is, on the is essentially a top 10 matchup, but, top 11 matchup if you really want to get specific. So, yeah, this is one that, it's going to be a fun watch.
Brody couldn't have said it better. Big opportunity for the Sooners to really make a statement. Wednesday is going to be a big day for OU fans in general. It's early signing day for football in the morning, and then a top 11 clash with North Carolina on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central on ESPN. Prime time, bright lights, big matchup. Pretty exciting opportunity for the Sooners. Brody, I think that's going to do it for us here on the latest episode of In the Paint, a basketball show fueled by OUInsider and the Rivals Network. If you're not a VIP member over at OUInsider.com, go ahead and head over there. You're going to find tons of content on football, recruiting from our guys, Parker, Brandon, Brian, me. Basketball, again, big point of the season, big matchup on Wednesday. You're going to find content from Brody and myself. And if nothing else, we have different things coming out on this OUInsider YouTube channel every single day. If you don't want to miss it, go ahead and hit the like, hit the subscribe button. A lot of things to look forward to. Brody, I'm excited about a really good game on Wednesday, what it potentially means for Porter Moser's squad. I know there's going to be a lot of OU fans out there watching. We'll see what happens. Until then, we'll see you guys next week.